Alrighty, everybody, Red Hulk. That's the end of the segment. No, I'm just kidding. Red Hulk. Red Hulk was a character that I never really wanted to see. I'm going to be honest. I've said this many times before, and, I remember having conversations about this even as early as, Infinity War Endgame, when Thunderbolt Ross was kind of coming back into the MCU. He was coming back in Black Widow, and you were kind of like, oh, are they actually going to be setting up a Red Hulk? And I remember talking to somebody, and he was all excited. He was like, yeah, Red Hulk's going to be so excited. This was like 2018, 2019. He was like, oh, Red Hulk's going to be so exciting. And I was like, am I the only one who doesn't want to see an older man turn into a Red Hulk? Is that just me? Well, flash forward about 6 years, and we are getting a Red Hulk. Not just any old Red Hulk, but one played by the legendary Harrison Ford. And I have to admit, everything I've seen from the trailers has been pretty good regarding the Red Hulk. So, yeah, color me curious and color me kind of excited just to see Harrison Ford in the MCU. So, doing press for the movie, Harrison Ford has been his usual kind of curmudgeon-y, unserious self on these press tours. I saw an interview with him and Jimmy Kimmel, and it was, as unserious as ever. But I love that about Harrison Ford these days, because he's just getting to do the rounds, and he's just getting to be a guest actor in these various projects like Shrinking and now Captain America. And it seems like he's genuinely having a good time. Case in point, they just did some interviews with him, and I'm going to read out some quotes that seem to indicate he'd be willing to come back as the Red Hulk. Now, we'll talk about later on in this segment some of my predictions for Captain America Brave New World. And I'm not going to spoil them in this segment, but there is one regarding what I think about the likelihood that Red Hulk is actually going to return in the MCU. So I'm not going to spoil my thoughts on that here, but you can go listen to that later on in the podcast. But anyways, I just wanted to talk about these quotes because I think it's actually really nice to hear this from Harrison Ford. So this is what Harrison Ford had to say when he was asked, is the Red Hulk going to return in the future of the MCU? He says, quote, "I hope he will come back. I hope there's a story in which I can develop into something other than a Red Hulk. I think we have the capacity to shift shapes between Hulkness and humanity, but that's really not my department." He goes on to say, "I was very happy with the opportunity to play in this playground. What an amazing group of people to work with, and what an imaginative reality. So I was looking forward to having a piece of the action." He says later on, quote, "I'd like to think the character was a great fit for me. I was honored to be able to do my work on top of the foundation that a wonderful actor, William Hurt, provided for the character. And the story is a wonderful extension of the stories that Thunderbolt Ross has been a part of." Okay, that's great. A couple more quotes in this article, and then I have another quote from another article as well. He says, quote, "I've watched Marvel movies and seen actors I really liked, really admired, have a great time. And I thought, hey, I want me some of that." He said that before. It's basically him repeating that quote in various interviews, but he said that before. And then he says, in terms of transforming into the Red Hulk, he says, quote, "I just went for it, and nobody stopped me," which is hilarious. That's so funny. And then somebody asked him, can he win in a fight against Mark Ruffalo's Green Hulk? To which he says, and this is so funny to me, quote, "It falls into the who shot first category. So the answer is Greedo." And I'm assuming most of you know what that means here in this channel, but if you don't, you just watch some Star Wars and figure it out, because that's really funny to me. He's been asked he's been asked about that line and that question to death, who shot first, and it's so funny to me. And then there's another article that I found where I guess it was another set of press, and he talks about the process of becoming Red Hulk. He says, quote, "The process is quite simple. I make faces. They make another face on top of it that fits the face I'm making. Basically, it's just making faces. I didn't know what I was going to do," which I think is really funny, by the way, because the whole process of the motion capture and getting the faces and stuff, and just imagining Harrison Ford in some kind of VFX studio trying to make faces at a camera. Anyways, continuing on, he says, "I didn't know what I was going to do. I was all ready to do something, but nobody gave me any firm instructions. Somehow they just assumed I knew how to become a Red Hulk." Again, it's really funny to me. And then I think the final quote that I'm going to read out here says, quote, "Nobody does this kind of movie except for fun. It's fun. Actors get to act, do silly stuff, but they don't do it silly. They do it sincerely for the audience's pleasure, for expanding the universe, their limits of your imagination. But it's got to have a human context. It's got to have some emotional realities that you can feel what you're seeing. Otherwise, you're just looking at it. Unless you can feel it emotionally, relate to it, it's not useful." Okay, so really, yes, the headline of this segment and sort of the question that we might ask ourselves is, does this mean Harrison Ford is returning for Red Hulk? Does this confirm that he survives the film and whatnot? Again, stay tuned for a later segment later on in the podcast where I talk about my predictions on whether or not we're going to see Red Hulk again. But honestly, I bring this up because I think it's besides the point. What I wanted to talk about is just the fact that it's so good to see Harrison Ford genuinely invested in this. Because, guys, it wasn't so long ago when he was doing press for the Star Wars films, and he was just the only thing he ever talked about was, I really wanted them to kill me, kill Han Solo. Just I don't want to be a part of this anymore. I'm done. I'm done. And then after The Force Awakens came out, he was like, yep, that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted out. I'm done. No more Star Wars. He was just not happy with it, or whatever the case may be. I think he gave a great performance as Han Solo in The Force Awakens, but it was just clear that he's like, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be Han Solo anymore. And I think recently, dare I say, he's found a second lease on his acting life, because I've said this before, and I've made an entire separate segment on this in a separate episode of the Access Blockbusters pod. His work in Shrinking is by far, at least in the 21st century, I think the best work he's ever done. His work in Shrinking is incredible. He is funny. He is heartbreaking. He is, yes, the same curmudgeon-y old Harrison Ford that we all kind of know and love now. But it is incredible acting from a man who is in his 80s now. And I am praying, I know this is a little bit morbid, because again, can't imagine living in a world without Harrison Ford, but if they can just get in Shrinking season 3 before he retires from acting or whatnot, then I would be so grateful, because his work in Shrinking is amazing. And, there's a sense in which I was a little bit worried when they cast Harrison Ford, not because of the acting at all. I knew he was going to give, or at least attempt to give a good performance, because, yeah, I mean, we can get, there's the scenario in which we get a Crystal Skull, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, where he was also very clearly like, I'm done. I don't want to be a part of this anymore. And then he comes back for Dial of Destiny. But anyways, there was a world in which I imagined he came, onto Marvel for Red Hulk, and he was just doing all the junket interviews, and he was like, yeah, they paid me a lot of money, and I didn't really want to do it, but they told me I was going to be a Hulk, and I said, whatever. And that would, I think there's a sense in which actors, right, when actors talk and they kind of bash their own work, or they kind of, disparage the audience, right, for lack of a better word, because sometimes there are actors who are like, oh, you're so silly for liking the movie that I was in. Like, why would you even like that? And I've even had friends, who are, I don't want to call them film snobs. That's not fair to them. Like, they're not even big cinephiles or anything like that. They just like the quote unquote more auteur artistic films. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, those films have their audience and they're held up in high regard for a reason. And then there are people I know who are just only into Oscar movies and stuff like that. And I like a good deal of the Oscar movies that I've seen. They're, a good deal of them I really enjoy. A good deal of them I also really don't enjoy, but that's just my sensibilities, right? And so I've had people, talk to me and be like, that's so stupid that you like these comic book movies and whatnot. Like, they're not actual, to quote the great Martin Scorsese, they're not actual cinema, right? They're not movies. They're, and I just think it's a little disappointing and sad, because we don't live in a binary absolute world. We can live in a world where we like both. And so I'm actually so glad to hear that Harrison Ford had a great experience, and he gets it, right? You heard him. He's like, yeah, of course it's silly. Of course, showing up to set and making faces at a camera, and then they turn me red and they make me a giant 10-foot monster. That's silly. Of course it's silly. But the sincerity with which it means something to the audience, right? There are people who have waited years. I'm not even kidding. This is not a joke. There are people who probably waited decades to see a Red Hulk on screen. Like, for some people, it's their favorite comic book character. And so, the fact that Harrison Ford understands that sincerity, and yeah, I mean, it's funny when he's like, I hate Star Wars or whatever, but I really am actually appreciative of the fact that he is going so far to say, of course, I'm interested in coming back. And I think that that's actually a really good thing. So whether or not he comes back, we'll have to see. But yeah, I just wanted to bring this up because I think it's awesome. I think it's just great to see Harrison Ford, and I'm excited to see him in Captain America: Brave New World very, very soon. What do you guys think of Harrison Ford's comments about playing the Red Hulk? Do you guys think it's a good thing, or do you guys think it's whatever it is? You talk too long about Harrison Ford being not as grumpy, and that's fair. I talked a while about that, but let me know in the comments down below.